Alrighty, hey everybody, welcome back to Apron Bumps. It's the Apron Bumps Wrestling Podcast. We are on episode 22. A long layoff has occurred. Yes, indeed, a long layoff. The Royal Rumble had come and went almost a month ago now, but I had like an early midterm. University's quite crazy, so like the ability to be as flexible as I was with the content in 2020 before my semester started in September is just not quite what it used to be, unfortunately. So I kind of missed predicting the Royal Rumble, and before that there was a Takeover WarGames in December before Christmas, which happened to be right around the time I needed to study for my final exams for my first semester. So I missed two big events in a row that I probably should not have missed and should have maybe scheduled in some time for, but I felt at the time it was necessary to focus 100% on the schooling, and the hobbies can always be resumed at any time, which is what we're going to do today. So as you can see, I'm about to predict the next Takeover event, which is the first Takeover of 2021. It's going to air tonight at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I am without my companions. Mr. Brandon Moyes is busy with what he's got going on. He won't be able to rejoin the podcast until WrestleMania weekend in April, so we won't be seeing him until pretty much the next prediction show, because that'll be the next one that we do. Obviously, I'm going to do a review of this show tomorrow as well. I'll leave this up for it to be its own podcast for 24 hours, and then I will do the review a day later, so that can also have its own day of being up exclusively. Mr. Gabe Nozed is busy with his job and with in relation to the military this weekend. He had a lot of stuff going on there in terms of the Trump trials, and he's one busy lad, at least for this weekend. As far as being maybe available tomorrow to help review the show, I don't know. I'll have to reach out to him. But for the predictions, he said he was not going to be available for it. Said I didn't want to miss this takeover because I want to talk about it, because the matches look pretty good. Like, this is a solid looking first card of the year for the NXT brand. I mean, it's their first takeover event of this year anyway. It's the quarter one takeover. And as I said, maybe Gabe will be able to review it with me tomorrow. Brandon Moyes is out until April. And if I got to review the show myself, like I'm doing the predictions, we'll do that as well. I did not want to miss this. So I'm left to my own devices to be able to predict the show, but we're going to do it as best as we can for the sake of podcasting wrestling. So as I always do, I always attempt to put the matches in an order in which I could see happening at the actual takeover card, and there's always like three matches that are all scrambled. Usually the only one I get right generally is the main event, which is usually always the NXT Championship match, which we will get to. But on this night, being NXT Takeover Vengeance Day, I guess they didn't want to call it Valentine's Day, so they went with another V word. But what's interesting is that this is a name of a long-running WWE pay-per-view since like the 2000s, or maybe, I think it started in the 2000s. Was it like WWE Vengeance was like a big 2000s pay-per-view back when I was kind of growing up with wrestling. It was like a show that they would usually do in like in the spring, late spring like June, or early summer like July. They'd have Vengeance. So it's interesting that they brought that name back. They've done it in the past with like In Your House was one of the takeovers for last year. They went with Halloween Havoc and the Great American Bash for special episodes of NXT that they built up. So not just a takeover, but they've actually been using like old school pay-per-view names for like special editions of television that they have been doing. So I like that they brought like it's Vengeance Day back. It's happening on Valentine's Day, so we don't want to call it anything lovey-dovey. This is wrestling. We're combative, so it's Vengeance Day. So the fact that they're bringing the name Vengeance back to a WWE show of some kind is really, really nice. So on this particular card, we have the finals to two tournaments that they've been doing on television as of the last month. They've been running the men's and women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic tournament simultaneously. So they have a women's tag team tournament, and they have a men's tag team tournament. Both have been going on at the same time over the last 3 to 4 weeks. And now we've gotten to the finals. So Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez were the first team to advance to the finals. They defeated Casey Catanzaro and Caden Carter to get to the finals. They were the first team to actually qualify for the finals at TakeOver. And then on the go-home show to TakeOver this week, Ember Moon and Shotzi Blackheart defeated The Way, which is the team of Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell, to earn their spot in it. And I knew that was going to happen because a heel team had already qualified, so I imagine that a babyface team would be going up against the heels rather than doing like two heel teams against each other, like The Way versus Kai and Gonzalez. I didn't think was all that likely, so I thought Shotzi and Ember were going to win. And they did, and now they've come to this point where this is the first ever finals for this is the end of the first tournament ever for the women. This is the first time that they've done a Dusty Cup for the women, and I think it's probably going to open the show. I mean, they could pull the old thing where they have the men's tag classic open and they leave the women's as the penultimate or second to last match, but I'm going to predict that the women's final is going to go first. I think no matter which way it goes, whichever, if it's the men's or the women's tag classic that opens, I think one of the finals will be opening up the TakeOver show tonight, and I'm going to go with the women's on this one. Should be a pretty good match. I mean, Ember is very capable. She was brought back to NXT after kind of having a completely mediocre run on the main roster, if you want to call it that, with her most memorable thing being getting injured chasing after the 24/7 title. She did a segment where she chased after it, and in just the awkward way she ran after this goofy belt, I guess she tore her Achilles tendon, which is a really horrible injury that no athlete wants to get. And for almost a year, her in-ring future was questionable, and she might have people were thinking she might have been forced to retire because of it, but she has recovered and has been on NXT television since TakeOver 31, when she made her big return as the mystery bike rider for the former champion that was coming back to reclaim what's theirs. As you can see, she's far outside the regular women's title picture and is now teaming with Shotzi in this tournament against, and Shotzi Blackheart has had a lot of, I think Triple H and company are very high on her. She's gotten a lot of screen time over the last year. She's developed as a character quite a bit. You could tell that they're pretty high on her as a talent, but I don't think they're nearly as high on Ember and Shotzi as they are on Raquel Gonzalez. And to a lesser extent, Dakota Kai. Dakota Kai is just the smaller wrestler who does a lot of the work and can kind of, structure the matchup and all that. And then Raquel comes in for her power spots and all that sort of stuff. It's that kind of combo. But this team is very much together for the benefit of Raquel Gonzalez. And I very much think that she is going to win this for her team. She's going to get the definitive pinfall. Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez will win the first ever Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. And it's a way to give Raquel a big win as they slowly build her up for the eventual collision with Io Shirai, which I'll get to the women's champ when we talk about that match. But I think that Raquel Gonzalez, through this win and whatever she does in the few months afterward, after winning the first ever Women's Dusty Cup with Dakota Kai, I think this is the beginning of her slow and steady push to the women's title. Because remember, back at WarGames, which I didn't review or talk about, it was Raquel Gonzalez who powerbombed Io Shirai through a ladder in the Women's WarGames opener back in December and pinned the women's champion to win the WarGames match for the heels. And she actually pinned the women's champion to get the job done. And she's done a couple promos kind of hinting at the fact that, she's beaten Io. She has her sights set on the women's title, but it's been very, very, very subtle, because I think they're doing a slow thing with her where they want to give her this big tournament win with Dakota Kai as a reason to give her like a kind of an accolade en route to getting towards the women's title. But I think it's inevitable that after this takeover, Raquel Gonzalez gets built up to be Io Shirai's next challenger at whenever the Quarter 2 takeover happens, say sometime after WrestleMania, right? We know there won't be a one in April. WrestleMania is taking 2 nights again. It's going to be split between Saturday and Sunday night, just like it was last year. And so that's going to be a weekend where there's going to be no takeover. So it'll be booked for some time. Maybe they'll wait all the way till June again, like they did last year. Maybe they'll do one in May. Maybe Triple H will plan one for the end of April. There will be one in Quarter 2. We just don't really know when. But I think Raquel Gonzalez, after this win here at Vengeance Day, she's going to take this accolade of sorts of being one of the first women to ever win a Dusty Classic. Her and Dakota Kai will be the first women to ever do so. and they use that accolade as a way to propel her forward in an eventual singles push towards the title. I imagine the match will be pretty good. I mean, all these ladies are pretty good in their own roles. Like Dakota Kai is a fantastic wrestler. Shotzi's really coming along. Ember Moon's like each of these women who are a little green have like a seasoned veteran as their partner. So, Shotzi's a little green in some areas, but she's still good for what she can do, and she's got Ember to kind of carry the load of the action to make that team good. And then at the same time, Raquel's very good for her power spots and looking intimidating and menacing and all that. And she's got Dakota Kai, who can kind of structure the match and be the workhorse of her team. So it'll probably be some pretty good stuff. I don't expect like match of the year or anything like that out of it, but I think it'll be a significant part of Raquel Gonzalez's career, and people will remember this win as one of the big things that she won before she goes on to what I believe is eventually win the NXT Women's Championship. So yes, very much in the camp that Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai are going to win the first ever Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic tonight. So that's that prediction. Next up, we've got the NXT North American Championship match. Johnny Gargano to defend against Kushida. Now, this, believe it or not, is the match that I've puzzled and thought about. And in how my mind works about the booking of both of these guys makes it the most unpredictable or the hardest match to predict on this very card for one reason. Johnny, whenever he's made it to a takeover with a reigning championship and he's holding a title, he always drops it in the first takeover title defense that's happened. Let's go back to when him and Tommaso Ciampa, as a part of DIY, won the NXT Tag Team titles. They would go on to take over San Antonio. They defended against the Authors of Pain, Akam and Rezar, the big team from NXT that really did nothing on the main roster, but they were a big threat in NXT. They were a big dominant tag team. And DIY ended up losing to the Authors of Pain and lost the tag titles in their first ever takeover title defense. They lost tag team championships. And you skip ahead a couple of years after that to NXT Takeover 25. Johnny Gargano is the reigning NXT champion after having beaten Adam Cole in what is still my favorite NXT match of all time, the 2 out of 3 falls match for the vacant NXT title at TakeOver New York in 2019. That match happened because Tommaso Ciampa needed neck surgery. He had to relinquish the belt, and then they ended up booking Gargano and Cole to wrestle for the vacant championship. And what a match they had. It was absolutely fantastic. Again, to this day, my favorite NXT match of all time. Gargano ends up tapping Cole out to win the championship, goes on to TakeOver 25 to defend against Adam Cole, who had become the number 1 contender, or stayed the number 1 contender. And in that match, his first ever TakeOver title defense of the NXT Championship, Johnny Gargano loses the title in that first defense to Adam Cole. And now here we are. And this is the first time that Johnny has actually made it to a TakeOver as the reigning NXT North American Champion. He's had 3 reigns of this belt. The 2 are really short because the first time he won it, he defeated Ricochet for it 2 years ago and then immediately lost it to Velveteen Dream at like the NXT tapings that happened days after that takeover happened. So he lost it right away. Never even got close to making a takeover. He wins it for the second time right before Halloween, defeating Damian Priest late last fall. And 2 weeks after that, he loses to a debuting Leon Ruff in like this fluke thing where they used it to further the Priest-Gargano program. And then, of course, at WarGames in a triple threat that involved Damian Priest and champion Leon Ruff, Gargano ends up pinning Ruff and regains the championship to where he is the current reigning champion today. And now he is making it, finally, in his 3rd reign as North American champion. He is making it to TakeOver to defend against Kushida, who has really had these kind of odd stop-and-start pushes. Like, he had this big run where he got taken out by Velveteen Dream because he got pinned in a triple threat that would qualify for the ladder match for the North American title back in TakeOver 30 in August of last year. And then Kushida came back super aggressive and angry, and him and Dream had this big build to TakeOver 31 where Kushida had a dominant win over Dream, and it seemed like they were writing Dream off, and he injured his arm, and then Dream just shows up and they just kind of feud for no reason for a few weeks after that. And then all of a sudden Kushida's taken off TV for whatever reason, and he loses a ton of momentum doing almost next to nothing. And then all of a sudden they start having him kind of gear towards Johnny, and they have him get like a pin over Johnny on television. They have him win in a non-title bout, and then they have, they start programming the two of them together, and then it's Johnny and Austin Theory who lose to Kushida and Leon Ruff in the Dusty Rhodes Classic. That's where Kushida first pinned Johnny after, kind of having some confrontations with him. And now they've pushed him to the spot where Kushida's challenging for the secondary title on this takeover. So it's like, I don't know. Johnny has a history of losing these championships in his first takeover title defense. He usually does. But he's facing Kushida, who they don't seem to really want to put any belt on of any sort. I don't really know why. It's like they don't want to really stay committed to the push of Kushida. Like, they could be giving him this takeover spot just to give him a significant spot on the card, give him a great match, because Johnny, especially when he's working with somebody that's at the caliber that is of Kushida, if he's wrestling somebody of that caliber, it's probably going to be a great match. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be one of the better matches of the card tonight. But as far as winning championships goes, I don't know if they ever are committed to pushing Kushida in that way. But I'm still going to think that takeovers are Johnny's bane. I'm still going to take his history and propel it further, because maybe NXT's at a point where they feel like if they don't give Kushida a big win, there's going to be a lot to lose with him. So this Sunday could be very well the point where they decide to give him the belt. So I'm going to book it based on the fact that Kushida has a lot more to gain than Johnny does for winning this championship. Johnny can just lose and be fine. It's happened a million times with him. Whereas if Kushida loses here after the whole Velveteen Dream thing, I don't know really if you can go. Like, if you at least put the belt on Kushida here, you can kind of, have him, he can continue to feud with Johnny for a bit until Johnny gets out of the title picture, and then he can go on forward from there. So I am going to predict Kushida to win the title, because I feel that the show needs some kind of title change. I really do think so. It's been a while since we've had a championship change hands at a takeover. I can't even remember the last time that... I guess the North American title, when Gargano regained it from Leon Ruff. But other than that, like in a singles traditional one-on-one match, I can't remember the last time that, in a traditional singles match, a championship of any importance on the NXT brand changed hands at all. So I'm going to go with that, but believe me, I will not be surprised at all if Johnny manages to retain for the first time at a takeover with a title and continue his reign as the heel North American champion. But just by a slim hair, by, like I say, a 28 to 27 round finish, I'm just barely in a split decision going to give it to Kushida here on this night. I could very well be wrong, but that is my prediction for this match. Next up, we have, this could also be the penultimate match for the night. They usually do save the Women's Championship match to be the second to last match before the main event. On an odd occasion, on really odd occasions, it's been the main event, but usually it's the second to last match. I have it here because I think one of the finals to the Dusty Cup is going to co-main event the show. I could be wrong, and this could be the penultimate match here, but we'll talk about it as if it's going to be third on the card. And that is a triple threat for the NXT Women's Championship. Io Shirai is going to defend against both Toni Storm and Mercedes Martinez. So this thing actually started at what was going to be just a straight-up program between Io and Mercedes. They had Mercedes Martinez make her big return to NXT. She left to go be a part of that awful Retribution stable, and then she requested to go back to NXT, and I guess they were just waiting for a good spot to kind of rewrite and fill her in. But in the new year, she returned and started attacking Io from behind and just kind of destroying her on television and attacking her, throwing her into the ring post, beating her up, bullying her, all that kind of good stuff, and having her eyes set on the championship. So for a while in the early January, I thought they were just going to lead to this being just, Io Shirai defending against Mercedes Martinez. Then all of a sudden they started throwing Toni Storm into the mix. They kind of had Toni team with Mercedes in the Dusty Rhodes Women's Cup, and because of Io Shirai causing a distraction and beating up Mercedes Martinez as revenge for Mercedes bullying her earlier on, Toni ends up getting pinned by Casey Catanzaro, and her and Caden Carter ended up going on to the semifinal instead of Tony and Mercedes. So now Tony's pissed off at Io for costing her that, and she also knows that Io is the women's champion and has beaten Io in the past. If we don't remember, when these two women first came to WWE, it was in the 2018 Mae Young Classic, and they were the two women in the final. And it was Toni Storm that won that, defeating Io Shirai to win that Mae Young Classic tournament, which is good. Which this fall will already be 3 years ago. That finals took place at the Evolution pay-per-view in 2018, the first and so far only all women's wrestling WWE pay-per-view. So it's been a long time since then, but Toni is using that as a reason that she can take the belt off of Io, and now it ended up becoming a triple threat ordeal. And this was the first match that was announced for this TakeOver card. It was the first match confirmed for the show. It was the first match officially announced, and I expect it to be pretty good. All three women are more than capable. Could definitely be one of the better matches of the night. I mean, it's really, again, where the men's Dusty final looks to be very interesting as well. But I think this is going to be one of the more better matches of the night. I do think it's somewhat predictable. Like, I don't see Io Shirai losing the belt here at all. I think this is an easy, solid third TakeOver title defense for Io. She previously beat Dakota Kai at TakeOver 30. She defeated Candice LeRae at TakeOver 31. She did not defend the title at WarGames because she competed in the women's WarGames match, and now here she is in a triple threat defending the title at TakeOver for a third time of her championship reign, and I don't think she loses here. I mean, they could throw a curveball where they decide that they want Toni Storm to be champion because they are high on her, and they have her win the belt here, but I don't think that's likely. I just don't think it's Toni's time yet, and I think Io, she could survive here by pinning Mercedes Martinez. I don't think Toni Storm is necessarily going to take the fall, but I do think Io retains in this match, and I think Io doesn't lose until she eventually has some big takeover or big NXT television title match against Raquel Gonzalez. I think Raquel is going to be the woman who ends Io Shirai's women's title reign. I certainly, like, Mercedes Martinez, I think has the least shot of winning the belt here. She's just a solid hand to have a great women's match at a takeover. Toni's kind of there to add doubt. She's like there to be kind of maybe they'll give the belt to her, sort of thing. And then Io's like the strong defending babyface champion. I mean, Toni might win. That's the only thing. If they are high enough on Toni Storm where they want to give her a brief little run with it, I don't know why they would if their long-term deal is to put the belt on Raquel Gonzalez. But if they decide, for predictability's sake, to give the belt to Toni for like a short little run, that could happen. I still don't think it's as likely as just Io Shirai ends up retaining in the end with this championship. And I think that's what's going to go on. I think Io Shirai probably going to pin Mercedes Martinez to win the title. Toni does not get pinned. Maybe she gets kind of taken out of the title picture for a while and then kind of gets slotted back in at some point. I just don't think it's Toni Storm's time yet. And I do believe Io Shirai will retain here and will eventually be on a collision course with Raquel Gonzalez, and they will face off for the women's title probably at the spring takeover between April and June, and that will be when Io Shirai will finally drop the NXT Women's Championship. I don't think it's going to be tonight. It could be, but I'm not betting on it. I say Io Shirai retains the title in her third takeover title defense in a triple threat match, no less. Should be some very good stuff there, though. And then here in the co-main event spot, I have the men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. So we have MSK, the team of Wes Lee and Nash Carter. They were a team from Impact. They were, I think, former Impact Tag Team Champions together. They'd left Impact and they signed with WWE. And WWE debuted them in this big Dusty Rhodes tournament, Dusty Rhodes Tag Classic. And they're facing the grizzled young veterans, James Drake and Zach Gibson, in the final. So for 2 years in a row, the grizzled young veterans have made the finals of the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. And here MSK debuted in the Dusty Cup, and now they've made it all the way to the finals. And I think WWE and Triple H in particular are very high on MSK as a tag team. We have to keep in mind that Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan are still the current reigning NXT Tag Team Champions, and due to their affiliation with Pete Dunne and Pat McAfee, they are a heel team. So they are heel reigning tag team champions. MSK have very well been positioned as a babyface tag team since coming to NXT. They are very clearly the babyfaces in this finals bracket. And the Grizzled Young Veterans are the heels, and they were the heels last year, and they ended up losing to the Broserweights, who went on to challenge Undisputed Era for the tag team titles. And I think it's going to be, this history is doomed to repeat itself here. I do not see Drake and Gibson winning this final either. I think this match has the potential to be great. I think it has the potential to be definitely one of the best matches of the show. Both teams are incredibly gifted. Both teams know how to work tag team wrestling very well, especially in the modern day. And I'm very excited to see these two teams tango. But I think the baby faces are going to pull it off on the fact that we got a heel team reigning as tag team champions. And Grizzled Young Veterans are clearly positioned as a heel British team. And I mean, they could probably have some great matches with Birch and Lorcan, but it'd be heel versus heel, which is just really, really strange. And with the way MSK just kind of got debuted as this big deal in this tournament in the opening round, and they've gone on and won every single match to the finals, I think NXT is forced on, or not really forced, but is dead set on pushing them to the top of the tag team division. So I see MSK winning this particular finals, and I think when they do go on to eventually challenge Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan for the tag team titles, I think they're going to win the tag team titles. I think they're going to get pushed straight to the tag team championships, and that begins with a win in the finals of the Dusty Road Cup tonight. Which also, I forgot to mention for the women will get a shot as well at the WWE Women's Tag Team titles. So again, my prediction, so the winners, I went with Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez. The winners, if it is in fact them, which I'm sure it will be, will go on to challenge for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles at some point, which would be an odd matchup to see Kai and Gonzalez challenge Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax. So that's going to be a very odd match, but who knows, maybe the women's tag titles will change hands to some sort of babyface team by the time Kai and Gonzalez decide to challenge for the belts. Because they win the tournament and decide to go on to challenge for the tag titles, you never know when they're going to actually challenge for the belts after winning the tournament. So maybe Shayna and Nia will lose them, but that'll be an odd match should Kai and Gonzalez challenge Baszler and Jax for the WWE Women's Tag Team titles. But we'll see where it goes. But yeah, so the men themselves also get a shot. They get a shot at the NXT Tag Team titles. They get a shot at Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan after winning this tournament. And again, due to the fact that Burch and Lorcan are in fact a heel team that are reigning with the tag titles, I see the babyface MSK winning this tournament and going on to eventually become NXT Tag Team Champions. I believe that MSK are getting pushed straight to the tag team titles, and it begins here tonight with a win over the Grizzled Young Veterans in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Finals for the men. And now, without any further ado, we got the main event of this show, which is set to be Finn Balor defending the NXT Championship against Pete Dunne in a match that I am 100% looking forward to. This match has been built up ever since, even before WarGames. They've had Pete Dunne kind of come out and have some sparring of the words with Balor during the NXT year-end awards when Balor won Match of the Year with Kyle O'Reilly. He walked by Pete Dunne backstage and told him if he wants a shot at the champ, he has to get in line. They've had a war of words on television over the last few weeks. Pete's attacked Balor from behind, attacked his digits with the finger bending and all that. Balor and him have had a couple intense face-offs, including the go-home show this week where they kind of stared in the middle of the ring and did their gestures at each other before going nose-to-nose. The build's been very good, and it's the first time that these two guys have ever actually wrestled each other. It might be the first time they've wrestled each other ever in their entire lives. I'm pretty sure it is. And it's here at TakeOver for the NXT title. I'm just excited to see it. Pete's a fantastic wrestler. Balor has been on perhaps the run of his career over the last year. It's got all the makings to be one of the solid early maybe match of the year contenders. I expect this to certainly be the best match of this show, and to be the one that we kind of walk away from NXT Takeover Vengeance Day going, oh man, that match was definitely the best, which is what you want from the main event. There's only one little thing with it, is I do think it is a little bit like the women's title match. It's a little bit predictable, because I don't see Balor losing the championship to Pete Dunne. I mean, I don't see it at all. The only person I see Finn Balor losing that championship to is to when he eventually has to defend it against Karrion Kross. Whenever that happens to be. They're doing a slow burn with Kross. I thought they were going to shoehorn him right here in the first takeover of the year and have him get the belt back, but that's not the role they're doing. They decided to give Pete Dunne a championship shot at this particular show against Balor, probably just to have a takeover quality main event for the first takeover of the year, have a NXT Championship match that people can really get excited for and know that it's going to be great and enjoy watching as it happens. And then, I think Balor's going to, they're going to have this great match with each other. Balor wins in the end, and then Balor goes on to reign into the spring until he has his eventual program with Karrion Kross, and I believe Kross is going to be the one to take that belt back from Balor. I don't see Finn losing to anybody except Karrion Kross whenever their eventual meeting happens. So with that in mind, it does make this match a little predictable in the sense that I don't see Balor losing in any way, shape, or form. But, the predictability aside, as far as what goes on inside the ring for however long they get, they're probably going to get a long time. Probably going to get around the same ballpark at the time that Balor and Kyle O'Reilly got at TakeOver 31. And it's their first time ever wrestling each other, at least in WWE, and it may be their first time wrestling each other entirely. So it's an exciting match from an in-ring perspective and from the talents of these two individuals, and it's awesome to see Pete Dunne get a takeover main event for the NXT title. Balor gets to have another great title defense before he inevitably goes on to drop it in the spring to Karrion Kross. I could be wrong, and that's not who Balor drops the belt to, but I think that's what they're doing. I think they're doing a slow burn with Kross to have him beat a couple people on television, and they use it as a long-term thing. So at some point after the show, I think you're going to see Balor and Kross kind of like cross, no pun intended, but cross paths a little bit more and have a little bit more confrontations, and Karrion's going to show Finn that he's interested in regaining the championship. In fact, Kross, ended up having an altercation with Edge when Edge went to NXT a couple weeks ago and told him he doesn't need to be concerned with either Finn Balor or Pete Dunne, because by the time WrestleMania rolls around, it's going to be Kross who's the champion. I doubt that it's going to happen that early. I was thinking after WrestleMania, Kross would get his shot, but who knows? But I think Karrion Kross is next, and the champion that he's going to be targeting will be Finn Balor, and it's not going to be Pete Dunne. But I think this match has a lot of potential. I think it's probably going to be the best match of this show, and one hell of a main event to start the year for takeovers for WWE NXT. So that's pretty well where I end the show today. Those are all my predictions for the show. As I said, it's going to be live at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So if you've enjoyed what you've heard on all the various podcasting platforms that we are a part of, let me just get the old links up here. I haven't recited these in so long, but yeah. So here's all of the platforms that we are listening to. So I imagine some of you might have listened to this on Anchor. And if you have, you can also listen to us on any of these following platforms if you use them. So we are also available on Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Copy RSS, and my personal favorite platform for podcasts and music, of course, being Spotify. So you can listen to us on all of those. Whichever one of those, if you use any of them, I imagine most of you use Spotify. You can listen to us and follow anytime we have podcasts on any of those following platforms. You can listen to us. Anchor is now done by Spotify, as you can see here. Anchor by Spotify. So it's a Spotify affiliate platform. But it also, it works with Apple Podcasts and Breaker and all those sort of streaming services. And lastly, if you ended up by, even more unlikely, if you listen to us and you liked listening to what you heard and seen on YouTube, you can subscribe to my Bracer YouTube channel. Aside from this, and aside from talking wrestling and all that, I also do Nintendo and Smash Brothers speculation videos every once in a while when I get a good idea to script it out and all that. So if you're into wrestling and gaming, this would be the channel for you. And I'm not going to waste any more time doing a big, long, drawn-out outro. I don't have any of my co-hosts to plug any of their stuff. But I'm just going to, let you all chill out for the rest of the night. Hope you enjoyed listening to my little predictions here. And I'm going to Spanish fly on out of here. And until next time, folks, take care.